Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. The Liberal government introduced its long-awaited foreign interference legislation today. The Public Safety Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, including a number of new measures, among them a foreign agents registry.
Under this registry, all individuals or entities who enter an arrangement with a foreign government or entity and who undertake activities to influence a government or the political process in Canada would be required to publicly register these activities.
Well, with his reaction to the legislative package introduced today by the Public Safety Minister, we're now joined by Ward Elcock. For 10 years, beginning in 1994, Mr. Elcock served as CSIS Director. Mr. Elcock, thank you for joining the program.
A pleasure.
So a lot to dig into with this legislative package, but I want to begin with the Foreign Agents Registry because it's been talked about for some time. It is a part of this legislation. How important is that piece in terms of fighting foreign interference?
I think it's probably better characterized as a useful piece to fight foreign interference. The reality is that foreign interference registry is not a silver bullet. It won't entirely solve the problems. But what it will do, it will, on one hand, it will identify for Canadians those people who, in fact, are working or being paid by a foreign government to represent that government. And up until now, in some cases, we've not necessarily known whether somebody was getting paid or being remunerated or receiving some reward or whatever for doing so. That is a positive thing. I think the other thing it would do is it would create an offense if you haven't registered and it turns out later that you should have registered, and which would allow you to be prosecuted for something that had happened in the past. And up until now, if that might not have been the case. So it's a useful tool for law enforcement in dealing with some kinds of foreign interference.
Now, Canada would not be the only country pursuing this kind of registry. I'm wondering from what you have been briefed on, what you've read, whether or not it's actually been proven effective in other jurisdictions.
Well, I think the Americans have long had one, probably longer than anybody else. And there's a recent example of them using it in the case of Chinese officials who were seeking to carry out activities in the United States, and they moved to prosecution against those individuals. The Australians have also done something similar. I think the British have either done it or are in the process of putting something together. I think the New Zealanders have something as well, but certainly the Australians were the other major partner of ours, if you will, to create a piece of legislation in this area.
Mm-hmm. Now, under this legislation, beyond the Foreign Agents Registry, CSIS will also be given the authority to provide information to non-federal partners. I'm wondering, from your experience, why would that be important? Would that not open up intelligence to abuse?
Yeah, I think that was my assumption was that the legislation would provide for something like that. In some respects, it was an advantage not having the authority to do that prior to this change in the legislation. CSIS could really only provide advice to the federal government. It was up to the federal government to decide on whether somebody should or shouldn't be informed, or to what extent somebody should or shouldn't be informed. It does put a lot of responsibility on the service, which I assume it will exercise as carefully as it can, because it's not going to want to damage its intelligence capacity by providing information to somebody who then releases it to the public or doesn't look after it appropriately. And in some cases, frankly, whether it really is necessary to tell somebody that about the fact that they may or may not be being targeted by a foreign country is not entirely clear to me that that's an essential requirement. I think if there is information that there is a specific threat to an individual, that's clearly something where it's much easier to make a decision about trying to get some sort of information to that individual, all the way up to providing some protection from presumably the RCMP or some other police force. But if there isn't that kind of threat, then there's a serious question in my mind how far you go. I think there was a lot of pressure around the what was alleged to be targeting of, say, Michael Chong. Whether Mr. Chong actually really needs to know that the Chinese are trying to find out information about him, I'm not sure that that's essential. In my view, it's not particularly essential. I'm sure he regards it as essential, and others may regard it as essential. Clearly, the government has decided it's going to move in that direction or allow the service to move in that direction. But it isn't clear to me that is necessarily essential for an individual to know such a low-level targeting as in the case of Mr. Chong.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, this legislative package, it was just introduced today, so we're going to see the political debate around it in the coming days. But given that this is just the start of the process, I'm wondering, based on your initial reading, are you encouraged by what's been introduced here by the government?
I think, as I said, it is a useful piece of legislation. Some of the other bits of legislation are much more housekeeping, and it's a bit odd to put some of them into a bill in a minority situation. But I guess the government has decided that it's going to go with a package of all things at the same time, of similar things at the same time. They will clear up some bits, some problems in the CSIS Act that have been encountered in the CSIS Act or in the findings of the federal court in particular. So it's a useful piece of legislation. I have thought for a long time that a foreign registry would be useful. I think the one worry I do have is that I think there are a lot of people who believe that who think that it is a silver bullet, and it is not, in fact, a silver bullet. It will help, but it will not. It will not ensure that foreign interference does not occur in Canada. It will perhaps make it clearer and make it easier to deal with interference in the political process itself. But foreign interference is a much bigger issue than just simply the interference in the political process.
Well, as we say, the debate just beginning. Ward Elcock, I really appreciate the insight tonight. Thank you for this.
A pleasure.